Hey everyone, my name is Honor. I'm director of Kitewood Productions. Thank you guys for tuning in. Today I'm going to be walking you through my color grading process in DaVinci Resolve Studio. This is using one of the clips from actually my previous uploads on that trip where I visited Ocean City and various parts of Delaware doing some exposure testing for my camera, my new lenses, and various other parts of my kit. So this is actually from the second morning in Ocean City during the sunrise, where the sun's out of frame, but I actually, the sands were like white, almost pinkish, and they were catching the sunlight, and so the light was almost like an beautiful orange hue. I want to capture some of that in this grade, and I'll walk you through how I get to that. So as you can see here, there's nothing actually going on. There's no little symbols here in your nodes, so there's nothing. I can turn my grade on and off. No changes, right? I'll walk you all through the node tree. So this is very simple. I have Darren Mawson to thank for this. So if you guys have any, really nitty gritty questions, check out him and Cullen Kelly. They're really, really awesome free resources on YouTube. This is going to be an input color space transform. So basically, first thing I want to do is manage this color space. This was shot in a Sony color space, and I want to transfer that into DaVinci wide. I can actually pull up a picture right here. So this image does a nice job of showing you if this is your, all the colors in the rainbow kind of thing, everything under the sun, then Rec 709 is basically a standardized format for like studios, monitors, broadcasting. Your TV uses it, but it's very narrow. So there's not a lot you can do here versus DaVinci Wide Gamut, which is what Resolve Studio works in, is massive. Right, so you can get a lot more fine-tuning, better cameras with better dynamic range. You can get more detail in there. But at the end, you have to convert it to Rec 709 or your image is not going to look correct. So basically, that's what color management means, and that's what my image is going to do, or this node tree is going to do, rather. It's going to take it from, remember, I shot in S-Log3, and then it's going to go into DaVinci Wide Gamut, where I'm going to do all my nice adjustments in that big, wide color space. And then after that, I'm going to take it into Rec 709, where it basically translates and maps those richer colors into something in Rec 709 that looks approximately similar. Okay, so this first part's really simple. You can always, a lot of people do it with just one node. I like to do two, so I can have that nice big color space to do my adjustments in. There's a lot of different advantages to that I'm not going to go into today. Color space transform, another color space transform. And so basically it's going from left to right, it's reading the signal, right? So my input color space is going to be Sony. And then again, Sony. This one was shot in S-Log3, but I think I've mentioned before, and already that's looking better, a little more interesting. I think I mentioned before that actually, hold on, did I change it properly or no? I did not. That using the 8-bit camera like I have, Sony S-Log2 is generally a better idea, but that is all right. So this is going to be DaVinci now. Okay, so I've gone ahead and adjusted this, and so now you can see when it's color managed how much better it looks. The waveform is more spread apart, a little bit more contrast. This is a great starting point. So you can see here I put in my input color space of Sony. I was shooting in S-Gamut 3 Cine and then Sony S-Log3. That's going out into DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate, but that's not leaving the entire program, right? That's just leaving this node. And then I'm going to do all of these adjustments in a nice big color space, and then I'm going to come back into DaVinci Wide Gamut and convert that to Rec 709, which is our standard format. So after this, I'm going to do some exposure management and balancing, and then this is going to basically further balance my image. If there's any sort of filter or some sort of color shift that I want to get rid of, this can be a really helpful node. It's also really nice for like a stylistic touch. Saturation of your colors, your hue, right? And then contrast is a big one, spreading apart your waveforms, making your image really pop. And after that, this should really get you about 85% of the way there to a balanced image. And then these are small little micro adjustments you might want to do. You might want to adjust the temperature, the tint of the image. You might want to mess with the actual curve. A lot of people like this earlier, and will solidify what they want about this curve first, and then move off of that. There's no people here, but sometimes the skin will have a shift that you can correct, and then shadows and dark if you want to inject any sort of interesting stylistic effects. After that, if you're doing all of this manually, you're not really going to be using any sort of LUT. Soften and sharpen is what this is. This can give you a nice little effect if you want something that looks more like film. Anything that's sort of trying to approximate a film look, I like to leave back here. And this node tree is really simple because really I'm not using it back on the back end here. But if you are interested, or if I was to be doing that, it would probably be a lot more complex and several series of nodes and such. Okay, so let's start with exposure and balancing. Generally, if you guys recall, I should be shooting even, in my opinion, S-Log2. This one was S-Log3, but this is because I was, messing with exposures and all that. So either way, you should be exposing to the right on Sony Color Science. And so first thing I'm going to do is likely bring this exposure down a little bit. I don't want to lose my information down here, right past this 128, where this image is too dark. But I do think I can bring it down a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to check out the vector scope here, which basically is mapping out my colors radially, right? So red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow. And you can actually see that I can, tweak all of these adjustments. This is what I was talking about. If you have a very blue image, you might want to take it in the yellow direction, that kind of thing. But you can see how strong this is. So even the tiny little adjustments are really changing what this image looks like. And then this is just super extreme. So taking it out here is just not going to do you any good. Okay, so I'm relatively happy with that. I might bring a little more blue into this, maybe in this direction. But to be honest, I don't want to touch this too much yet because I'd rather fix up my contrast first. This isn't always like a linear process. It depends on the image. So I'm going to touch up my contrast here. And in this case, all right, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's go back to this lift and see if we can inject something interesting here. I'm going to just go ahead and redo this. So I could even take this in a green sort of sickly color if I wanted. Red was probably not going to look too good because it's already so orange. And this doesn't really make any logical sense, but blue might be kind of interesting because we might get some colors to pop, and I'm really happy with that. Right? We can mess with the saturation a little bit. I think it looks fine. You don't want to, amp this up too much, but maybe a slight touch could do us some good. Maybe a touch more. All right, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So that's getting pretty close to a general approximation of what I want. Let's go back to the waveform, and let's see here. I'm going to do some micro adjustments. I'll be right back. All right, so I went ahead and touched up my exposure a little bit and mostly my contrast here. So just a little bit more fine-tuned, and I'm just going to mess a little bit more with this offset here. The other thing I want to show y'all is you actually have some different options. So lift is at the bottom of your waveform, so you can crush a lot of the times if you have noise in your shadows, you can crush the blacks and lose the noise. Doesn't really make sense in this bright image, but that is something you can do. That gives you one sort of effect, right? Your gamma is like the mid-range portion of your wave, so that'll really boost the overall amplitude of the signals. And then this can give you a different effect, right? Messing with these colors. Your gain is the top portion of your signal, so it's mostly, let me mess with this first. It's mostly the brightest parts of your image getting brighter, so you can see that that's different from this, right? Those have a different effect. And that gives you a very different shift. And then this is basically global. So your offset is your overall image, and I'm just going to fine-tune this a little more. I think we can make this a little bit more interesting, and I'm actually going to switch to the vector scope for this. All right, I further touched up my offset and lift, and you can see there are some changes. I don't really know that this image needs any lift. I think it's fine as it is, but now we're really going to start to get into stylistic stuff. So I'm going to make it a little warmer. Cooler is not really doing it for us, so and actually before I do that, I want to further manage this image a little bit. So I'm going to play with these settings and see if I can't get something a little bit more of what I am looking for. So like I said, I can take the lift up or down. Doesn't really make sense to take it down too much, right? But let's see if we can get something more interesting. So now that we've touched up our contrast, you can see that there are the changes here. I'm going to mess with our curve. I don't really think this image really needs it, but I could be wrong. We're just going to play with it a little and see what happens. Okay, so I've touched up the final image and it looks something like this. So without color management, with color management, because only these two nodes are on, then we're going to turn on our exposure and balancing node, and that's going to drop our exposure considerably. So we're coming down from there to there. After that, we're going to introduce a slight offset to the color. This is something I played with iteratively, right? So the more I got this image where I wanted it, the more I come back to this node. You can also inject a second or third node. It really is up to you. After that, saturation. This is also something that I wouldn't really bother too much about until you balance your image, right? So after exposure and balancing, I really focused on the contrast here. And then this is actually, you can see, is too much right now, right? But that's something I also iteratively adjusted based on everything else that I was doing. And so after that, I was able to touch up my saturation, bring in this offset that I really love. It's gorgeous. After that, we've got a temperature and tint adjustment. I adjusted my curve, so just a slight shift. Skin we're not using, and then I changed the color of my shadows just a little bit. I think it really adds to the image. Yeah, that makes pretty much the final image. So you can see here that everything that I did was very. We can go back to my old one that I grabbed. And you can see here like how much has changed to this final grade. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and play this final clip for y'all. Great. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope this video is helpful, a little bit insightful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions. There's always things we can learn and improve on. Thank you all for tuning in, and see you all in the next one.